Triads are one of the most fundamental parts of playing music on any instrument. They are simple, yet possess infinite possibilities within them. When it comes to guitar, there are a few as important moments as when triads finally click. It opens up new ways to approach a lot of activities we perform on the guitar, and it lets us understand what we've been playing all along a whole lot more. Triads are actually one of the first things a piano player will learn, yet on the guitar we often don't bother with this for years or even decades. Triads are simply three notes. A triad can either be major, minor, diminished or augmented with three different inversions each. We will be focusing on major and minor triads in this lesson. The major and minor triads have these three notes: the root, the major or minor third, and the fifth. This is constant between the inversions and the shapes. They are used everywhere and they are the most common type of chord there is. The root determines which chord we are playing, the major and minor third determine the tonality, and the fifth is there to reinforce all of it. When we look at different inversions, we will see that the deepest note is not necessarily the root note, but that won't change the actual chord that we are playing. Now you already know what triads are. Let's take a look at on how we can construct them on the guitar. There are three ways you can construct a triad on these three bottom strings, and we're going to be focusing on these three bottom strings today. And the first one is called a root inversion. Now let's stop for a second and talk about inversions. What is an inversion? It sounds fancy. It's not really fancy. It's basically the same chord, but you're using a different note from that chord as the bass note. Not as the root note, but as a bass note. In this case, the bass note is just the deepest note. So let's see. We have our root inversion, A major triad right here. We are going to be playing A major triads for all shapes, and this one, as I said, is the root inversion. In this case, we have our root up here, and then we have our major triad in the middle, and the fifth down at the bottom. Now, if you put this together, you get an A major triad. Simple. Now, what about first inversion? Even simpler. Just like this. You have your root here, you have your fifth here, and then you have your major third right there. That is a first inversion. And for second inversion, you're not going to believe this, but it's even easier. It's the same shape as a D chord, but it's not a D chord. It's an A major triad, surprise. Just because it looks like a D chord doesn't mean it's actually a D chord. Chords can have the same shapes in different positions and they will give different chords. Chords are determined by the notes underneath, and in this case we have our root right here, we have our fifth on the top, and we have a major third down here. So now you know all three shapes. Now you just need to practice them. The way I practiced them back in the day was I simply took a chord progression and a key. Let's say I'm gonna take A major and I'm gonna take a 1, 4, 5, a simple classic chord progression. I'm gonna take that 1, 4, 5 and I'm gonna play it only using first inversion triads. So how would that work? First I would need to identify my first chord, which is this. I have my A here, which means I have my A major triad right there. And if I have my 1 here, then I have my 4 here. And if I have my 4 here, that means I have my 5 here. And suddenly I have a complete chord progression only using one specific inversion shape. Now I would do this with each shape, so then I will move on to, let's say, second inversion shape. I have my first chord here, my fourth here, fifth here. Simple. Then to root inversion. Again, I would have my first chord here, I would have my fourth here, fifth here. Amazing. Now I basically know where each chord is in each shape. But before I would move on, I would actually try and mix them together. So I would decide in the beginning that I would play the first chord as a first inversion, the second chord as a root inversion, and the third chord as a second inversion, for example. And then I would keep mixing and matching until I would get everything under my finger. The next step I took was actually learning my minor triads. Now, if you actually learned where each note is in each shape, this will be very easy for you, because all you have to do to create a minor triad instead of a major triad is to make the major third into a minor third. So, major third, this is the third, move it down 1/2 step, becomes a minor third, everything else stays, and it's suddenly a minor triad. Let's look at the second inversion. So, we have our major version. This is our major third. We move it down 1/2 step, and it becomes a minor triad. And for our root inversion, our third is in the middle, and we move it down 1/2 step, and we have our minor chord. Simple as that. Now we can play major and minor triads all over the neck. Now you might be asking, okay, I know major and minor triads all over the neck. What can I actually do with them? Because it's not like Adam Neely is going to wake me up one day and then create a test which I have to pass about triads. That's not going to happen. So how can I actually take this practice and make music with it? Well, the first example that I want to show you for the usage of triads is this scenario. Let's say that you are playing in a band and you are the second guitar player in this band. There is another rhythm guitarist and he's playing open chords like this. And you also want to be playing chords. You want to play a bit of rhythm, but you don't want to be playing in the same position as the other guy. Because if you're playing in the same position, you're just doubling up on the same notes and it's going to sound muddy. And you're going to be competing for the same sound stage. Instead, you can actually use triads. And triads will allow you to move above it and then harmonize with him, creating a wider sound stage and a much more interesting and fuller sound. The second example is if you're actually playing alone and you want to play a song that has a normal 4-chord progression, but the progression does not change between the verse, the chorus and the bridge. So what are you going to do? Are you going to play the same chords in the same position for the whole song? No, you can take first position for the verse and then you can move to triads for the chorus and vice versa. So that will allow you to not get bored while playing the song and also make it seem like that you know a lot more about guitar than you actually do. It's a good trick because if you play up here, everybody thinks that you're a magician, but you're just not playing in first position anymore. The third thing that you can do with triads is voice leading. Voice leading is the practice of playing chords and harmonies and melodies in a way where they sit closer together. So basically, instead of playing this, we can play this. Same chord progression, same notes, but they are sitting much closer together, so they give you a different sound than the one that's stretched out all over the fretboard. Now, you might not want to be using this technique. It depends on you and depends on the music and the situation you are in. Sometimes it sounds better to use voice leading and then compress these notes together or closer together. Sometimes it doesn't. The next usage of triads is using arpeggios. This is something that you see in jazz all the time. They are moving all across the fretboard using simple triad arpeggios. So the next thing you can do is embellish your triads, like John Frusciante, for example. It basically means that you are taking your triad and then you're playing notes that are in the next triad or triad close by, or using notes from the same scale that are close by. You can also decide to play lead guitar and play solos and intros using only notes from triads. There is a very famous song that has an intro that basically only uses notes from the triads that we already know how to play. That is Jessica by the Allman Brothers, and if you paid attention, it's basically just using our A major triad, the root from our 4th chord, root from our 5th chord, walks it all back, arpeggiates it, moves here, which is again our 4th, moves here, which is a part of our A major, back here, and then back to this note, which is also a part of our A major. So every single note that we played is part of a triad that we already know how to play. What about rhythm? You can also play just rhythm using triads. Let's see. For example, if you're a virgin, you might recognize that one. That is Island in the Sun by Weezer, and it's only using chord shapes that we already know how to play. Now you might be also asking me, what can I do with the rest of the strings? Well, that is for a different video, but you can also create triads using these strings. All of these strings you can use to create triads, but there are a lot more options when you get the rest of the strings involved, so that will be in a different video, and I think this should last you for a while, just getting all of this into your playing and then trying to make it as musical as possible. You should try to actually make music with it instead of just practicing it. So once you know how to play them and where they are, stop practicing and start actually playing music with it. And that is all for this video, and thank you for watching.